some things that I wanted to address having to do with things that I feel that occur on the spiritual path that a lot of people don't talk about, a lot of teachers don't talk about, a lot of healers and readers and occultists don't talk about. And I wanted to really address it. So this is going to be really hodgepodge and all over the place. It's me just addressing different eclectic topics of spirituality in the spiritual community and giving my 2 cents on it, basically. So one of the topics I want to cover is on TikTok and these other channels and on people's Facebook, people sharing pictures of their altars, people sharing videos of their rituals. It's like practicing has become people wanting to share or brag, and they don't understand that these are rituals that can be influenced by other people's energies. And I personally feel like the only people that do this are people that are new to witchcraft. This is usually like there are young people that are in their like early 20s and shit I see doing this more often than not, or people that are older that are new to it. Because I feel like most people that have been practicing some variation of root work, of magic, sorcery rituals, really understand the importance of not showing your altar or, showing pictures of spells you did. Unless you're showing it to somebody that asked for you to do a spell for them. Like, they hired you to do that spell. Otherwise, you're pretty much giving access to energetic imprints from other people and energetic influences. And that kind of leads me on to the next thing I was going to talk about, is a lot of people, we become so immersed in social media and the internet and the web as a society that we really haven't thought about the energetic imprint that goes on in the internet and even the fragmentation. There's actual soul fragmentation that occurs over the internet because of even mild traumas happening, on the web. Interactions between people, things we read or videos we watch, or same thing with television. But the whole thing is when you have like a profile that represents you, that's an avatar view. That's an extension or representation of your energy. That's the same thing that people use in representational magic. They use avatars to represent people, which is why magic works when you're doing it at a target, whether that is beneficial magic or baneful magic, okay? So being mindful of who you have on your friends list, being mindful of who you allow into your space, be mindful of what you're sharing about your personal life, because that is an extension of you. You may look at it as, it's just the internet, or, it's just, it's just Facebook, it's just TikTok, it's just Clubhouse. Yeah, but that's a representation, that's an avatar of you that exists in the web, which is a different level to the same energy matrix that we live in here. We're so used to having the internet around and having social, networks and media, and that we don't think about this stuff. And it's becoming a trend or a fad to share your rituals where other people can watch them. Well, guess what? Just as if I'm, on TikTok or I'm on YouTube and I see a ritual popped up, just as I can feel the energy from that ritual, I can also influence energy of that ritual if I wanted to. So it's just, my advice to you, to these practitioners that are doing that. I mean, of course, do what you want, but just understand that, the more that you share of that, the more access other people have to it. Now, if you're sharing things to teach, so for example, if you're sharing something out of a grimoire or a book of shadows, okay, and you're sharing a step-by-step ritual process that someone paid for, or maybe it's on Patreon, or you're teaching somebody, that's different. I'm talking about showing people publicly your altar. And even if you're doing that spell work for another person, you're giving all of these strangers energetic access to that to some degree. Even if you have protections up. Because the minute that you put that out there, you're putting that out there. Me personally, I'm not really a big fan of that shit, of sharing that kind of stuff. So, again, if you're doing like a webinar, a Zoom session with a client, or you are hired on to do a ritual and you're sharing that with them, or you're teaching somebody, that's different. But just to circulate that shit like in the public, I don't know, man. One thing I will say, guys, okay, is a lot of us are correcting distortions and inversions in some of the old ways and practices. That is what a lot of us are doing, breaking down outdated paradigms, restructuring. So I'm not saying that if you feel intuitively drawn to do something for a specific reason and it tends to go against the grain, don't do it. Like, for example, one practice may say use salt for cleansing, another practice may say use salt for protection. Who am I to say what works for you? I can say, oh, well, according to this custom or culture, this is what you would do. However, different things work for different people. I did a Facebook post on this recently where I said, hey, don't always think that you have to follow some cut and dry formula when it comes to, for example, prosperity, because different people are going to get prosperity different ways. Some folks, they may need to tune into more of like the infernal realm, working with demons, doing things at night, doing rituals and blood sigils. Someone else might, want to go meditate out in the sun with a piece of pyrite, doing angelic tone mantras. Someone else, might want to make like a mojo bag and blow cinnamon into their front door during the new moon. Someone else might, want to live offerings of, honey and milk to elemental spirits, dance around a bonfire. It just, do what works for you. Because everybody has different DNA, everybody has different ancestry, everybody has different soul resonance, and everybody has a different purpose down here that they have assigned to themselves. So I'm not trying to dictate to you how to do your shit. I'm just saying be mindful of giving folks access that you don't even know, giving the public access to your personal altars and rituals, because your altar is an actual externalized See, a lot of people don't know what altars are. They think it's about worship. And these altars are representations of the inner, the inner altar, the inner temple. They represent the energy work that I do and the things that I'm doing internally as much as they do the external world. So I literally give myself offerings on my altar. And on Patreon, I talk about, with my patrons, of creating your own altar as well. So it's not about worship. And it's also a sacred space. So if you, are sharing that with everybody and their fucking brother, it's no longer a sacred space. It's essentially like you're just giving people access to your externalized energy. So yeah, that's how I look at it. Another thing I want to talk about is people getting graveyard dirt. This is a big deal. In fact, I'm going to be doing a video on necromancy soon. It's not going to be going into like resurgence and reanimation, because as I mentioned recently on a Facebook post, although I have been able to successfully reanimate a simple life form, I was given very specific rituals that I'm not supposed to share with anyone. And I've tuned into this myself from within and tried it out. And so I'm not going to be sharing anything like that. And even if I was going to be sharing it, I would do it on Patreon anyway. But this is going to be just going over the topic of the different levels of necromancy and ways that you can start that journey. But it's not going to like contain set rituals or anything like that. But I do want to mention real quick getting graveyard dirt. For those of you who are practitioners, and if you are part of a set path, okay, like you're not eclectic, you work with a very specific cultural practice, okay, then I would recommend you do the collection of graveyard dirt according to that practice, okay? If you work with certain underworld or infernal spirits or even liminal spirits, then those would be the spirits that you would work with when you're going to collect graveyard dirt, especially underworld and infernal spirits, and especially underworld spirits, okay? And you can leave offerings to them as you enter the grave sites, as you enter the cemetery. Now, one thing I want to mention, and again, this depends on your culture, I recommend either wearing black or white, okay? Now, if you live in a culture where black is a traditional color for entering a cemetery, I would wear black. If you come from a culture where it is traditional to wear white, then I would wear white. Either way, it's important to cover your head, because in most cultures, it is said, and this can happen, a lot of spirits hang out in cemeteries and they like to attach to the back of the head. So just be mindful of that. I also recommend when you're exiting a cemetery that you do so making sure that nothing follows you out of the cemetery, okay? And you can even carry like holy water or Florida water or some other kind, or living water or whatever, and actually, bless yourself before you go in and after you leave as well. Now, before you even step in, you're going to want to leave an offering to one of, to an underworld, spirit or a liminal spirit at the gate. And you're definitely going to want to leave another offering at the gravesite that you're going to. Now, I recommend going to a gravesite of an ancestor. If you're not going to do that, then let your intuition guide you, and then you can actually tune in and ask that particular grave, the spirit of that grave, permission if they're going to let you to take dirt, and you can leave an offering. And you'll intuitively get like a yes or no. And if they say no, then just go somewhere else, go to a different grave you feel drawn to, and then ask them. So, there may be some sort of, you might also want to do some sort of exchange with them as well. I don't want to go into much, I don't want to go into a lot of that. And again, this depends on your specific practice, but I'm just giving in a general sense, this is the way it goes. So if you don't work with any underworld spirits or liminal spirits, just out of respect, leave something, by the gate. Leave some coins, some flowers, some food, something by the gate when you're going in, and leave coins, flowers or food at the gravesite, depending on who you're taking the graveyard dirt from. That would be the proper and respectful way of taking graveyard dirt. So if you're going to buy it, make sure you buy it from somebody you know. Don't buy it from some random person on Etsy or Amazon. You can't verify where they got it from. So, Another thing I want to talk about. I want to talk about ancestors and the DNA, and how ancestors and the DNA, it's not just about healing. Like, yes, we do want to heal our ancestors and help elevate them. We do want to heal our ancestry. We do want to heal trauma loops. We do want to heal the collective shadow and do soul fragment retrieval on behalf of our ancestors. But beyond that, our ancestors can also help us. They carry within our DNA, as part of their DNA, in our DNA, they carry certain gifts and wisdom, certain ways that they can initiate us. If an ancestor shows up and they want to give you something, vet them out. Always vet out any spirit. I don't care who they are, what they are, always vet them out first. But if an ancestor is willing to share wisdom with you or teach you something, ancestors can also just have things come to you. Just, you might seem to know something out of nowhere. It's not always like a download from somewhere else. Quite often you're just tuning into something in your own DNA and it's coming forth out of you. Or you're doing some sort of activity and you seem to have a knack for it, but you never learned it. Guess what? That's ancestral and past life related, and the two are connected. Definitely be open to that. Definitely be open to learning from your ancestors. Be open to communing with your ancestors. And it can go both ways. In fact, the more you work with your bloodline and to heal your bloodline, the more your ancestors are going to want to also help you and support you. And I go more into the details of ancestral work, the dangers of it, the details, and the protocols on Patreon. So you can definitely check that out on there, depending on the tier you join. Another thing I want to talk about is, I want to talk about balance, or the line between gatekeeping and appropriation. So a lot of people lately have been calling out cultural appropriation and have been being very protective of closed practices. And I do think it's important that if a practice is closed to a certain lineage, that that is honored. However, on the opposite end of that, you have people that feel that, oh, well, everything is just spirit anyway, and this is all talking about sciences, and it's just through the guise of different cultures, so I'm going to learn it from the scientific perspective. Well, you do that, and that's okay, but don't forget that some of these practices might have come from people that your ancestors oppressed, that your ancestors stole from. So those would not be the practices you want to get involved in. Whether you are, just trying to work with these energy currents on your own as a solo practitioner, or whether you're looking to be initiated, that might be something to keep in mind, unless you feel a specific reason, a specific calling, maybe to correct or heal that within your ancestry. But yes, at the end of the day, these are energy currents, and this is about spiritual science. But there is still a process or protocol to certain closed practices. And, if you're not from that lineage and you haven't been initiated or welcomed into that lineage, it's not something for you to pick and choose from and just take what you want out of it. And you know what I'm saying? And there is a difference between closed practices and non-closed practices. People appropriate, concepts from Hinduism all the time. When they talk about the chakras, especially in the New Age community, when they do yoga, all this other stuff. But it's not a closed practice. Trust me, the part of it that is closed, they don't teach. There are initiations of kriyas that you go through in India. I know because I've gone through a couple of them. They will hold that shit back. Trust me, there is stuff that they keep to themselves. The type of yoga, the type of chakra knowledge that most people have is watered down and reappropriated at best. They kept that shit to themselves. Trust and believe. So even within practices that appear to be open, there are closed elements. Not everything is for everyone, and not everything is for every bloodline. Why are you even looking into other people's shit anyway? Like, people need to start going into their own bloodline and finding out what power is in their own bloodline. Okay, let's say, for example, if you don't know what's in your bloodline, then find out. Research it and do ancestral work, and your ancestors will reveal that to you. Also, know that there is power in your DNA. Practices are more likely to work when it is connected to your own DNA, because you're going to get more out of it if it's connected to your DNA. That's the power of the DNA. So let me explain what I mean by that. Let's say there are a couple open practices. Something. Let's say that you've been researching dealing with Greek gods, Hindu gods, and Norse gods. Okay. Because those are not closed practices, right? But they do belong to, Hindu gods go back to the Indian culture, Norse gods go back to the Norwegian, Viking culture, and Greek gods go back to the Greek culture, okay? But they're not closed practice. But let's say that you're wondering, well, I feel kind of drawn to this and this and this, but I don't know what to do, Okay, well, what is your fucking ancestry? What if your ancestry, is Germanic? Why the fuck aren't you dealing with the Germanic, shamanistic past? There are shamanistic paths and spiritual paths in every culture. Why not go into your own? You know what I'm saying? And I'm not saying there is nothing wrong with dealing with, if a spirit calls you and approaches you, then they call you and approach you. Who am I to say otherwise? But I just wanted to kind of talk about this for a second, because there's a lot of people that are going eclectic and they're really going all over the place, and they're dealing with everything but their own fucking DNA and the own energies in their own DNA. Yes, these are archetypal expressions, but every bloodline has their own archetypal expressions. So, I'm going to go back to my original example. So if you're Germanic, if that's your dominant DNA, instead of dealing with Ishtar, Or instead of dealing with, Aphrodite, or instead of dealing with Freya, why don't you deal with Ostara, for example? Look at what your culture is and what the magic is within your own DNA. Don't be so hasty to just gravitate off of whatever's popular that's circling around just because that's what people talk about. Like, everybody wants to, be a devotee now of all of these popularized gods and goddesses. And, demons and angels. But you know what? That may not be what's for you. That may not be what you draw your power from. So you have to think about that. You have to think about the cultural energy of your ancestry, your DNA, past life pacts you've made. You have to think about, multidimensionality, where your soul's from, where you've incarnated. I mean, there's a lot of stuff here. Not every angel gives a fuck and is going to help you. Not every, daemon wants to deal with you. Not every god or goddess is going to be, thrilled to fucking work with you. Trust me, these are energy currents. Yes, these are archetypal energy currents, but they are conscious. They are beings. And if they don't want to fucking work with you, they're not going to. So what would you rather do? Sit there and, pour your energy, and leave offerings for an energy current, never talk to them, never know shit about them. You know what I'm saying? On a personal level, never develop that connection with them because you don't have that connection in your DNA. I'll give another example. There's this group I used to be in dealing with Hecate or Hecate, depending on the pronunciation you want to use. She is actually one of the goddesses I work with. She was actually one of my first that I started working with. If a spirit or a god or goddess or angel or demon approaches you, that's different. They're approaching you. You know what I'm saying? They're choosing you. That's different, especially if you're a solo practitioner and especially if it's not a closed practice. But she came to me and I was able to hear her, to get messages from her, to talk to her, to see different, epithets of her show up when I was doing rituals and stuff. I had a connection with her. I had a connection that went, back in time. Okay? But I saw people that were in the group that they were literally worshiping her because they liked her vibe and they knew she was, one of her epithets is, the Queen of Witches and stuff. But these people weren't hearing from her. She wasn't dealing with them. Do you get what I'm saying? So it's more important that you deal with energies that are closely connected to your DNA or that call to you instead of going out and seeking these energies because, oh, hey, I want to develop this, so I'm going to try to work with this being. Or I'm going to try to deal with this being. Well, maybe that being don't want to fucking deal with you. Ever thought of that? Or maybe, your great-great-great-great-grandfather raped, one of their devotees. You ever think of that? So I'm just saying, be mindful about this shit. Be mindful about what energies you let into your energy field. Be mindful about what spiritual practices, you're taking from. Go within, because you will really be surprised. And the more you go within, look, DNA is so vast and so intricate and so multidimensional. You will constantly learn new shit about what's in there. So that's where the power lies, within you. Whether it's coming from past lives, this lifetime, ancestors, soul family, pacts you made, whatever. And, everybody's going to draw their focus and their energy from different realms too. So it's okay. Like I said, just like it's okay to work, to go about your magic differently depending on where you connect or what you draw energy from. It's also okay to work with obscure energy currents that no one has fucking heard of. You don't have to gravitate towards something. Okay, this is another thing. Okay, just because on an algorithm you keep seeing readings from, Asmodeus does not mean you're supposed to work with Asmodeus. I'm just giving that as an example, okay? That is not, nowadays with everything, yes, if that kept happening and you were also receiving other direct confirmations, including even visitations, then yes. But a lot of folks are just like, oh, well, I'm seeing Lilith on my timeline all the time. It must be I'm supposed to work with her. Well, it could also be that hell of people are working with Lilith now. It's becoming a trend. doesn't necessarily mean she's talking to you. And I'm not trying to be harsh, guys. I'm just being honest. Like, you have to vet this shit out. Like, there are a lot of different energy currents out there, a lot of different archetypal expressions to work with. And your power is from within your DNA. So what resonates with you personally, from within, you know, and if they approach you and they say, literally, they offer to work with you and they give you the terms and you agree, then that's different. But I just really felt the need to talk about some of this stuff. Like, in a general sense, I want to close with this. Do what's right for you, okay? There is that fine line between, you know, appropriation and close practice, you know, and correcting inversions. In a nutshell, do what you feel drawn to do, but just understand that there are consequences to actions, and there are certain protocols. There are certain protocols in place that are there for your protection, that the ancients have figured out from doing this for a very long time. But it doesn't mean that it's for you either. So, like I said, you know, one person may feel drawn to use salt, you know, to cleanse. Another person may feel drawn to use salt to protect. Hey, if it works for you, it works for you. Okay. But yeah, it's just about being mindful, guys, and going within, knowing thyself. And that includes your ancestry, you know, your past lives, your soul resonance, your purpose. This is a bit of a ramble type video, but I hope that it helped you guys. I hope that you guys were able to take something from this. Take care.